Okay, good morning. I think we better start, and thank you very much for coming. We have all their excellencies and other panel members. There is no doubt about it, we are meeting at a very critical juncture in the development trajectory of developing countries, and in particular, the least developed among them. As you know, the global economy is still in a very recovery stage, very slowly, from the COVID shock and the other trade and economic-related crisis triggered by COVID. And before even starting to recover, unfortunately, the Ukraine war also instigated another round of crisis, mainly in terms of food prices increase, energy prices increase. All this is affecting the LDCs more than other developing countries. Now, all this is happening also just 6 years before the international community meets perhaps in New York to assess the achievement in terms of, as you know, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the very basic principle of the SDG and the 2030 Agenda, and very important principle, is leaving no one behind. And that's very important, which means that come 2030, if there are countries that are not catching up, then that 2030 agenda is not achieved, regardless of what other countries have done. And it's a bit disconcerting that the countries that are remaining behind, unfortunately, are the least developed countries. And today, in this side event, we're going to discuss issues that are pertinent for the least developed countries. Now, as I say, the time we have is short, and I'm hoping to ask 2 rounds of questions, and which means that I have to beg our panelists to be a bit short so that we have enough time to go around again, and then, if possible, hopefully ask you to pose your questions and see whether the panelists could respond. So for my first question, and I'll direct this to His Excellency, Mr. Carlos Pinto Pereira, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Guinea-Bissau. My first question is, how did Guinea-Bissau address the challenges instigated by the recent multiple crises that I referred to? And also, linked to that, what is Guinea-Bissau doing to build resilience against current and future global challenges? It would be good in 5 minutes if you could briefly tell us what Guinea-Bissau is doing, to get out of the crisis, plus also the actions that are being taken. Thank you very much, sir.
Merci beaucoup, bonjour. Je vais parler en français, pas en portugais parce que je comprends qu'il n'y a pas de traduction en portugais.
I decided to continue in French because I suppose there is no Portuguese simultaneous interpretation. I mean, I could have prepared a speech, but I'm afraid that we couldn't have the time for it, so
la première question, c'est qu'on doit aller un peu avant, parce que quand on parle des pays les moins avancés, quand on parle de la réussite au nom de leur parcours, la grande réalité, la réponse qu'il faut donner, tout clair, c'est que la plupart de ces pays, des pays les moins avancés, parmi lesquels Les pays africains sont
many of the least developed
majorité,
countries, meaning a lot of African countries, and majorly
les 46 pays sont africains.
they are African.
La grande vérité, c'est que ces pays ne vont pas atteindre les objectifs
46 of the
de développement soutenable
43 of the total of
les objectifs
46
fixés soit par les Nations Unies, soit par l'Union africaine. Et même
I'm
le
afraid
plan
they are not going to
d'Istanbul
hit their 2030
qu'on a
goals,
adopté ici
either
même en
their own
Travailleur
goals or
depuis
the goals
2011.
set by UN
Et la vérité,
or
c'est que
the
ces pays
pledges
n'ont
that
pas
came after
atteint ces
Istanbul
objectifs,
Convention.
pas
I'm
à
afraid
cause
they're not going
des
to
crises
make
du
their
Covid
2030
ou
goals.
d'autres
And it's
crises
not just because
qui
of
sont
those
survenues
crises
après,
or COVID-related
mais parce que,
challenges
en
or
effet,
everything
les
that came
politiques
after
qui
those
étaient derrière
crises. It's not just
la
those
motivation
challenges that
des plans de
push the countries
développement
to fail
de ces pays,
to
de mon
achieve
point
their
de vue,
goals.
étaient
The
des
fact
politiques
is
erronées.
that the motivation is
Et
not there.
on risque de
And
continuer
the
à commettre
policies
les
are
mêmes
not
erreurs si,
set
par
correctly.
exemple, je
And as a
suis
result of
tout
those,
simplement ce que notre modérateur vient de
wrongfully
me
set
proposer.
policies,
Ça veut dire, supposons
goals
que
cannot be achieved.
la
As
situation
stated by our
actuelle dans
distinguished
laquelle mon
moderators,
pays et la
looking
plupart
at the
des pays
current
les moins
picture,
avancés se
looking
trouvent
at my country,
est due
and
à des
actually
crises comme le
looking
Covid
at
ou la guerre en Ukraine.
the
Non, c'est
various
pas vrai.
LDCs,
Nos crises
you
ou
see
notre situation
that
économique et
the
sociale
challenges
est
they're facing
mauvaise
is not due to COVID
au-delà de
or
ces questions
the
Covid ou
Ukraine
Ukraine ou
war
autres.
that erupted.
Et
I mean,
on doit
the
le chercher
situation was already
dans
bad
des
before Ukraine or
racines
before COVID
un peu
already.
plus
So
profondes.
that is why
De mon point de
we
vue,
have
par
to
exemple,
dig
je
deeper
pense
and
qu'une des
search
questions
for the actual
fondamentales
root causes of those
qui explique
challenges.
cette situation,
So,
c'est
looking at the fundamentals,
la déficiente, le déficient engagement de nos gouvernements dans la planification de tout ce qui est éducation. Et on a failli. On a aujourd'hui une société dans nos pays dans laquelle on a encore des analphabètes, dans lesquels on a, disons, des niveaux très bas de scolarisation, pour ne pas parler des solutions professionnelles telles comme on le requiert partout dans le monde, soit au niveau de la formation professionnelle, soit au niveau de la formation universitaire. Et quand on a la formation universitaire, ce sont les formations de papier et cahier, on n'a pas de mathématiques, on n'a pas de laboratoire de physique, de chimique et des choses comme ça, on n'a pas des ingénieurs, alors évidemment ce n'est pas possible de créer une société soutenable si on n'a pas les moyens, les ressources humaines nécessaires pour faire ça. Alors, moi, là, je pense que nous, pays les moins développés, les PMA, et vous, les pays les plus développés, il faut quand même qu'on s'assoie ensemble et qu'on discute sincèrement comment appliquer les milliers de ressources qui sont mises à disposition de nos pays, de façon à qu'ils puissent être convenablement applicables et des résultats, disons, concrets puissent être présents. Une deuxième raison que de mon point de vue est aussi présent, ce qui devient de toute cette histoire de financement du développement en Afrique, qu'on ne voit pas. On ne voit pas. Moi, je me rappelle, vous tous, vous connaissez le plan Marshall qu'on a établi pour l'Europe après la guerre. On a tous connaissance de ça. Mais on ne voit pas ça en Afrique. Mais pourquoi ? On fait des petits investissements et on pense qu'avec des petits investissements, on peut y aller. Non, on ne peut pas y aller. Il faut créer vraiment des infrastructures, routières, énergétiques, communication. Et là, il faut de gros investissements. Mais on ne le voit pas. On continue avec de l'énergie, la pire énergie possible au monde. On continue avec le pire système de communication au monde, les routes, tout ça. Alors, c'est vraiment nécessaire de changer. Il faut vraiment un changement. Et là, il faut admettre que la logique qui nous a été vendue jusqu'à maintenant de Bretton Woods, Fonds monétaire international, Banque mondiale, n'a pas servi, qu'il faut changer. Et moi, mon espoir, c'est vraiment que maintenant, avec les BRICS, les pays qu'on appelle maintenant du Global Sud, se réveillent et commencent à fixer des modalités de financement pour les pays africains et pour les pays les moins avancés, mais les moyens efficaces qui nous permettent de faire ça. Si on parie vraiment dans l'éducation, si on a les moyens pour faire, pour créer les infrastructures nécessaires au développement, moi je pense que dans 10 ans, dans 20 ans, les pays les moins avancés seront en condition de rejoindre l'équipe avancée sans aucun problème. Mais sinon, on va continuer toujours.
In a decade or two,
la fossée,
they can catch up
la
with the
différence
developed
entre
countries.
pays le moins avancés et pays
Business as usual, the picture will remain the same, and the gap between the developed countries and the LDCs will get even deeper and worse.
Thank you very much, sir. I think this is a very honest assessment. Basically, I think the message I'm picking up from what you said in generality is that when we talk about this global crisis, the shocks that are creating problems, we should also look inward about policies, how we implement them, and the way you put it, the root causes of these problems, lack of action. I think that's very honest, that's really correct, because in LDCs, one of the challenges is policy implementation. So the message is very clear. Thank you very much. I would like now to put the same question, actually, to His Excellency, Mr. James P.T.R. Morgan, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Republic of South Sudan. Sir, as I said earlier, how does South Sudan address the challenges instigated by recent, they call them poly-crisis or multiple crisis or multidimensional crisis? You know what I'm referring to. They are related to health, financial, trade-related, and food prices increase, and energy prices increase. So what is it that South Sudan is doing to build resilience against current and future global challenges? You have the floor, sir. If you could do that in 5 minutes, that would be good, so we can come around again for another question.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for having me here on this forum. And thank you all, those who are present here in this room. I think the question presented to me is very important for me to share the experience of South Sudan with the rest of the world. The situation of South Sudan is completely different in the sense that South Sudan had been most of these years, when the rest of the world existed, South Sudan had been struggling for its freedom. And then when we got our freedom in 2011, things did not go well also. We had another war in the country, which was brought about by those who were all the time struggling for power. This is the situation in Africa, power struggle. So this power struggle took us back for another 5 to 6 or 7 years almost. South Sudan had never had infrastructure from the beginning. We had been colonized through remote control by the United Kingdoms. The powers in Sudan, when it was one Sudan, all the powers were centered in the center in Khartoum. So South Sudan was just a periphery. Nothing was there. No road, no nothing. Nothing was built. Only the military warfare was what we had. It is a long history. If I go on it, it may take us here a long time. But let me just come to the question that is directed to me by our moderator. We had signed a peace agreement finally, and we had all these years been implementing the peace agreement. South Sudan is now peaceful. We are also going to go for elections at the end of this year, 2024. This will be the first elections that we are going to have in the country. Regardless of the COVID, regardless of other setbacks that affected the global world, we were having our own problems of the economy, despite that we are also an oil-producing country. We don't have access to the sea. We have to transport our oil through the pipes, which were built in South Sudan and goes all the way to Port Sudan in Sudan. So we have also the problem of the infrastructure in the country, as the country was not developed at all. Now that there's peace, we are working on making sure that all that the world has is what we also want to have in our country. So we feel that this topic, the best of it, what we need to do is at least to, especially considering the issue that we have, I will touch on the various aspects related to South Sudan and the other least developed countries as well. I will also discuss cooperation, mechanisms, policies, and we also need like G20 support and the role of international organizations, technology, and intellectual property rights. In terms of this cooperation mechanism that we are requesting is that the development partners that we have in South Sudan, it is very important to have them. In particular, South Sudan looks into the regional and international cooperation mechanisms to facilitate trade, investment, and technology transfer. We encourage also inclusive partnerships and South-South cooperation to stimulate economic growth and sustainable development. Policies that we're building for the resilience, we must adopt policies that promote economic diversification, human capacity development, and infrastructure development. South Sudan, of course, recognizes the importance of the policies that address vulnerabilities that we are in and building resilience against global challenges, including climate change and the pandemics, and also policies that are promoting inclusive growth, gender equality, and sustainable natural resources management are essential for the least developed countries, including South Sudan's resilience. When we talk of the G20 support and global governance mechanisms, the G20 has a pivotal role in supporting least developed countries' structural transformation. South Sudan urges the G20 to ensure that local least developed countries' concerns are included in global governance mechanisms. It is essential for the G20 also to champion the needs of the least developed countries in international forums and to provide financial and technical support for their development priorities. One of the most important things that we are facing as the least developed countries are not only what I've said. We have the issue of the sanctions. I want to know whether the sanctions really can help a least developed country to help itself. The sanctions are being used by the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and other powerful nations in the world to continue suppressing the least developed countries. The least developed countries are not only suffering from what our moderator mentioned here, like the COVID, which are the pandemics, even the climate change. these are not the only things that are facing us in South Sudan. We are faced with the sanctions. I don't see anything that the sanction can do to help the least developed country. So, Your Excellency, the moderator, I think we can take opportunity of this forum to understand how difficulties the least developed countries are going through. We are suffering in so many things. So we appeal that for us to get a chance of development, at least, things called sanctions should be removed because there is no need. Sanctions cannot help in anything. So I will stop here for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for highlighting additional other challenges and different dimensions. You're absolutely right that the history of countries matter, how they develop. And colonial rules have the constraints they create for countries, making them latecomers. You also highlighted the challenge associated with landlockedness. You also associated the challenge associated with being sort of dependent on single commodities, like in your case as oil exporter, and the need for economic diversification. I think it's important you also highlighted regional integration. In Africa, of course, now we hope the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is become operational, will provide opportunities. And more importantly, you also mentioned about sanctions, which are narrowing the policy space that African countries, especially African LDCs, have, as if it is not enough to have these global shocks. When sanctions are added, it's really multiplying the challenge. Thank you very much for highlighting these points. Now, I'll move on now and ask the same question. Her Excellency, Madame Sylvie Bipo Temon. She is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Francophone and Central Africans abroad, Central African Republic. So my question again is the same. How does Central African Republic address these challenges we're talking about, where now really all countries are facing them, especially LDCs? And what is it that Central African Republic is doing to build resilience and preparedness for future global shocks?
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Bonjour à tous. Ce sujet est assez important et mes deux précédents collègues ont parlé des points assez des défis qui concernent tous. Il faut savoir que dans les pays les moins avancés, mon précédent orateur a indiqué que la plupart étaient des pays africains. Donc, ce qui fait que dans l'ensemble, l'environnement géographique de l'Afrique, on fait face tous aux mêmes difficultés. Et les objectifs de développement durable aujourd'hui nous fixent un objectif de croissance à peu près 8% de mémoire. Donc c'est un objectif qui est à 2030, il faut qu'on soit honnête entre nous, pour ces pays moins avancés, en tout cas dans lequel mon pays fait partie, c'est un objectif qui est impossible à atteindre. Il est impossible à atteindre parce que nous n'avons pas l'accès aux financements qui nous permettent d'investir de manière suffisante. Et pour pouvoir investir et atteindre cet objectif de croissance, il nous faudrait obtenir des financements à plus de 400-500 milliards de dollars. Donc, ce qui n'est pas atteignable à 2030, donc d'ici 6 ans. Il faut savoir aussi que les difficultés, alors c'est pas, nous menons des actions dans nos différents pays, en République centrafricaine en particulier, mais il faut plutôt faire l'accent sur les défis que nous avons. Les défis que nous avons sont les défis d'un point de vue de développement économique, du fait de nos insuffisances économiques, mais davantage des défis en termes sécuritaires. Mon collègue du Soudan du Sud a parlé de l'exemple de son pays, mais la République centrafricaine n'est pas en manque des difficultés, de nombreuses crises qu'elle a connues et qui sont à la cause de son sous-développement. Pour ceux qui connaissent la République centrafricaine et ceux qui ne la connaissent pas, c'est un pays qui a plus de 620 km², peu peuplé, entre 5 à 6 millions de population, et qui possède d'extrêmes richesses au niveau de son sous-sol. l'uranium, le pétrole, l'or, le diamant, le cuivre, le lithium, le colbate et autres. Et donc le paradoxe est de dire que vous avez un pays en termes de sous-sol qui est riche, mais des habitants qui sont au-dessus de cette qui marchent sur la terre sont dans une précarité, une pauvreté extrême. Donc cela est dû à quoi? Cela est dû au fait que nous sommes divertis de l'objectif de développement économique et concentrés sur des sujets de sécurité, de sécurisation et de stabilité, notamment de stabilité politique également. Et toutes les instabilités politiques que mon pays a vécues, tous les pays connaissent des difficultés, des turbulences politiques internes, mais pour nous, elles sont essentiellement dues à des questions d'ingérence. On a parlé de la colonisation, donc notre histoire aussi est importante, nous avons le poids de notre histoire d'être un pays colonisé, et aujourd'hui, soyons aussi honnêtes entre nous, nous faisons face à une nouvelle forme de colonisation plus moderne, mais qui empêche nos différents pays de pouvoir avoir des stratégies de développement économique qui soient propres à notre pays. Donc c'est d'avant tout, en premier lieu, dans le cadre des défis, c'est d'avoir acquérir une vraie liberté, une souveraineté pour pouvoir définir nos propres actions, notre propre vision, et aussi d'avoir des organisations internationales qui soient plus équitables. Parce qu'encore une fois, dans ces objectifs de développement durable, il y a beaucoup de choses qui sont dites, mais c'est souvent les objectifs que se sont fixés des grandes puissances auxquels nous, pays africains, nous devons suivre. On parle de tout ce qui est énergie renouvelable, on parle de pollution, mais nos pays africains, nous sommes les moins pollueurs de ce monde. Donc, on nous demande de sauter des étapes par lesquelles certains d'autres pays sont passés, notamment l'industrialisation. Aujourd'hui, les ressources budgétaires de la République centrafricaine sont essentiellement dues à des produits primaires, agriculture, élevage et autres, alors que d'autres non. Donc nous avons aussi besoin d'industrialisation, parce que l'agriculture notamment, nous sommes encore dans une production vivrière. Ça veut dire que c'est encore les hommes qui travaillent la terre. Nous avons besoin d'un minimum d'une semi-industrialisation qui nous permettrait d'atteindre un certain cap de développement et de permettre justement d'asseoir des programmes de développement qui ont un impact social beaucoup plus grand en termes d'éducation, en termes d'accès sanitaire, en termes de développement d'infrastructures et autres. Donc nos défis sont nombreux, défis économiques avant tout, mais le défi économique est lié aux défis sécuritaires que je dirais qui nous sont souvent imposés. Nous avons, pour la petite histoire, toujours en République centrafricaine, nous avons notre dernière grande crise qui a eu des impacts économiques et sociaux très importants, date de 2013, avec l'agression du territoire par des troupes majoritairement étrangères. Lors de cette rébellion que la République centrafricaine a connue, la République centrafricaine a été mise sous embargo, donc dans l'incapacité de pouvoir justement répondre et se défendre par elle-même. Et nous voyons que par ailleurs, quand d'autres crises se passent, je parlerai de l'Ukraine ici, nous avons envoyé au maximum, en tout cas nous, Africains, mais les grandes puissances ont plutôt libéré les armes, et souvent des armes qui étaient interdites par des traités que nous avons tous signés à un certain moment. Donc le deux poids deux mesures de la communauté internationale fait qu'on ne peut pas demander à l'Afrique, en tout cas aux pays africains et aux pays les moins avancés, d'atteindre des niveaux que les plus grandes puissances se sont trouvés. Les enjeux stratégiques au niveau des grandes puissances sont plutôt néfastes aux pays africains. Et ce qui est important, notre grand défi sur lequel nous luttons, c'est d'atteindre d'abord notre souveraineté, d'avoir notre mot à dire. Nous avons l'exemple concret de l'Organisation des Nations Unies, qui a été créée en 1945. La plupart de nos États ici n'étant même pas nés en 1945. Donc nous n'avons pas pris part à ces grandes décisions. Donc forcément, ces décisions qui continuent aujourd'hui sont l'œuvre de certaines puissances qui se sont octroyées le droit de pouvoir définir les orientations et l'avenir des autres. Donc le premier défi est là-dessus, c'est de retrouver plus d'équité au niveau de la scène internationale et laisser justement ces pays les moins avancés, et encore une fois je parle de l'Afrique et en particulier de la République centrafricaine, de pouvoir exploiter ses propres richesses, ne pas la laisser dans un conditionnement de mendiant, de devoir aller demander du financement parce qu'elle a les capacités sur sa propre terre, de pouvoir justement faire partie des pays en voie de développement, émergents ou encore mieux des pays développés. Je vous remercie.
That is acting like a beggar.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Want to be poor.
I'm glad you mentioned the 7-8% growth rate required to achieve SDGs, because in the fourth UN conference held in Istanbul, here in Turkey, in 2011, one of the agreement is that LDCs should achieve at least a minimum 7% growth consistently for at least 10 to 15 years for them to be able to achieve SDGs and to be able to double, perhaps triple their GDPs and then achieve SDGs. But that has never happened. And you're also right that having resource endowment underground is one thing, but using it is another thing. If you don't have the resources, don't have the finance, it's very difficult. You also highlighted it's important that conflict is a major challenge in African LDCs. It sets you back. There are some studies in the UN that show that 1 year intensive conflict sets you back in terms of recovery for 10 years. So that is another problem we have. So now I move to UN organizations that are very important development partners to African LDCs. And we have with us my friend, Mr. Sabah Sobhani. He's the director for the Istanbul International Center for Private Sector Development. And my first question to you is a very simple one. You're doing a good job to help LDCs. How can development partners and the international community as a whole strengthen the role of the center to do what it does? If you could tell us that 4 or 5 minutes so we come around again for another round of questions. Thanks.
Excellency Pereira, Excellency Morgan, Excellency Madame Baipotemo. My name is Sabah Sobhani. I was born in Burkina Faso, so in the LDC country, originally from the Middle East, worked in Silicon Valley, and came here to set up a center, a global center on private sector. There are also all kinds of new trends that's happening that's going to revolutionize the world around artificial intelligence and all. You have right now NVIDIA, which has a stock sort of capitalization of $2 trillion, more than Canada's GDP. You have, if you read in the news, and which, by the way, because I have dual citizenship as an American, I was able to invest and triple my money, in the last 6 months. You have an announcement this morning that they're creating humanoid robots. That's going to change. The incredible amount of changes trends. Our center set up one of the first AI labs around 6-7 years ago. And when you look at things like even the food system, food security, energy, and sort of water crises that all these countries are going to face in terms of climate change, the important role of such technology is going to be incredibly instrumental. We had the Minister of Finance of Djibouti, His Excellency Dawala, who was here 1 year. We looked at LinkedIn. You look at the LinkedIn, it is white in Africa, meaning almost very few data scientists. It is only India, China, UAE, America, it is driving. And he said, we really need to set up an initiative where we can enable youth from the LDCs to become data scientists of the future. So we looked, there were 60,000 African students in Turkey. So with the support of the Turkish presidency, with the UN Technology Bank, we've launched what's called Frontier Techs for LDCs, where we are basically enabling young sort of LDC students to become data scientists and frontier, sort of to help their government to do other things. I give you one example. You talked about the geopolitics of food system. I spoke to a business in Lubumbashi recently. They're making a killing right now, commercializing the first wheat producers in DRC. I said, how did you do it? Wheat in Congo? They say predictive algorithms of AI. So this is what's going to drive the future of food, energy, and all these things. So we're very much honored to have all senior, government members from your countries. We'll be honored after Djibouti to have this initiative also established in your country, because this is going to be a critical part of the future of the LDC that we need to take into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sabhan.
And by the way, we've had already 50 students. It's a very rigorous process. Coming from where I come in Silicon Valley, we've had 1,000 students apply, and it's just not learning for the sake of learning. They have to do projects and all these things. So we have it up, and we're just launching the second round in 2 days. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabhan. I did actually participate in the graduation as I was a student. It was very impressive to see the type of projects they do using frontier technology. You have highlighted very important area. Technology innovation, real drivers of growth and structural transformation. And there is no doubt that for latecomers to development like LDCs, through technology innovation, they will be able not only to leapfrog, but also to catch up with other developing countries. In fact, talking about technology and innovation, my next question is going to be to Federica Irene Falomi. She is the officer in charge of UN Technology Bank for LDCs, created in 2016 specifically to support the LDCs, based here in Turkey in Gebze. And again, my question to you, first of all, is what are the development partners international community can do to support the work of UN Technology Bank? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, dear moderator, excellencies, panelists, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, a very, very warm thanks and appreciation to the invite we received as Technology Bank from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the government of Turkey, which is also a very, very big supporter of the work of the Technology Bank for the LDCs. So the first thing I wanted to mention that I think resonates with some of the remarks that, that were already made is that the Technology Bank is an organization that was established specifically for the LDCs. Therefore, it's really the least developed countries UN entity. So its work, it's really linked to one of the root causes. We've discussed a bit on root causes of the challenges that the LDCs face, and one of them is widely acknowledged to be the low level of productive capacities, which is also very much linked to the challenges in achieving the industrialization that was also mentioned earlier on by Her Excellency. Developing productive capacities is widely considered the most effective route to achieving economic diversification, productivity improvements, and therefore also the economic growth that is much needed. And one key factor of building these productive capacities is actually building technological and innovation capabilities. So the whole technological development process is very much linked to the structural transformation process that these countries are looking forward to achieving. And this was widely acknowledged in both the Istanbul Program of Action for the least developed countries for the past decade, and now in the Doha Program of Action that will cover the decade from 2022 all the way to 2031, so very much overlapping with the Agenda 2030 of the SDGs. And this program of action, which is a commitment of all the international partners and the member states really, in support and of course of the LDCs themselves, has acknowledged the role of science, technology and innovation towards structural transformation in a very clear way by making it one of its key priority areas. And indeed, even the Technology Bank itself was established as part of this process of recognizing this as a key area that the LDCs need international support in. And the Technology Bank was established not very long ago, in 2016, by the General Assembly. And more recently, in the Doha Program of Action, it was further recognized as a focal point for science, technology, and innovation development in this country. So the work of the organization is very much linked to this process that we are mentioning and we are discussing already of building education skills, technological capabilities, achieving industrialization, and therefore then economic growth. Now, the key question is how do we also support countries in identifying areas where they can also build on partner support through transfer of technology, through investment in technological skills development. So the Technology Bank is working very closely with governments, ministries in LDCs to develop together what we call technology needs assessments. So these are roadmaps, these are tools that really aim to identify the areas and sectors of the economy where countries need to invest and have access to technological solutions. And through this technology needs assessment, which we have already completed in 12 least developed countries, we've already mapped a good wealth of technological needs and solutions. Now, going actually to the central part of the question, how can the international community, how can development partners support and further strengthen the work of the Technology Bank and of the least developed countries in this area when it comes to technological development. So there's two main points I would like to highlight. First, member states have committed to support the Technology Bank in a number of intergovernmental processes. So member states and particularly development partners need to live up to this expectation. At the moment, the government of Turkey has widely supported this process in a very South-South approach also as well, triangular cooperation and so on. So this has materialized, but it's not enough to meet the expectations and the mandate that this organization has, which is very, very wide and important. So the first one is supporting through financial commitments to strengthen the effectiveness and capacity of the Technology Bank as per the commitment made in intergovernmental process. But financial resources is not the only way. So there's a wide range of technological solutions, know-how, expertise, and skills that are widely available elsewhere in the world and that can be transferred to the least developed countries upon demand, of course. So the Technology Bank works really to facilitate this process, and both from the global north and emerging countries, the global south, there is a wide range of expertise, know-how, and technology that LDCs can access and should be made available to them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Federica. I'm glad you highlighted the limited productive capacities. This is really critical. This is the root cause of LDC's problems. The product capacities are the competencies, the skills, the capabilities, the technologies, innovation that countries need to be able to produce a wide range of products that they can either consume domestically or export competitively. That's what differentiates between developed and developing countries. So you have highlighted that, it's very important, and then you highlighted the importance of technology needs assessment for LDCs, and I hope LDC members here are listening, because the needs assessment that UN Technology Bank does is very, very important policy tool. And then lastly, you highlighted two questions which will lead me to ask Excellencies afterwards. You highlighted in terms of what is it that development partners could do. I think it's very important, Federica highlighted. She said that development partners, if they make the commitment, they should live up to it. There's no point making a commitment to support LDCs if you then do not follow up and live up to your commitment. Secondly, you highlighted that it's not only just financial support. LDCs need technological inputs transfer. So if you make a commitment to provide technology transfer, you should. Now, building on that, if I may go back to His Excellency, Mr. Pereira, and unfortunately, as you can see, the time allocated is going very fast. So this is going to be a very quick 2-minute, maximum 3-minute answer. But I'm going to build up on what Federica is saying. From your country point of view, Guinea-Bissau, what is it that the international community, especially development partners, could do in terms of international support measures, specifically that you think are important, but that Guinea-Bissau is not getting?
Merci une fois de plus. De mon point de vue, l'approche plus importante, c'est celui de
So in my understanding, the most important thing to focus here
de façon directe et honnêtement. Nous savons que les moyens qui sont mis à notre disposition ne sont pas bien appliqués. Mais quand même, on continue à insister là-dessus et les résultats ne parviennent jamais. Alors, je pense qu'il faut quand même, s'il y a un partenariat, que ce partenariat puisse exiger des contreparties, exiger des résultats. Là, je pense que malheureusement, il y a une certaine manque de responsabilisation des deux parties. Ce n'est pas seulement de ceux qui reçoivent, mais ceux qui donnent aussi. Deuxièmement, je pense qu'il faut vraiment répondre directement aux besoins des pays les moins développés. Et pas au contraire de nous imposer une agenda qui ne nous appartient pas. Nous, on a suffisamment étudié, reconnu et étudié le problème dont nos économies souffrent. Et nous pensons avoir les réponses adéquates. Mais souvent, les mécanismes de financement et les pays partenaires imposent ses propres règles, imposent ses propres domaines et ses intérêts dans le cadre de ce partenariat qui ne sera pas un vrai partenariat. Alors là, je pense qu'il faut respecter quand même les décisions et les options de chacun de ces pays. Finalement, je pense qu'il faut en effet supprimer des réglementations qui sont défavorables à nos pays. Dans le cas précis de la Guinée-Bissau, c'est inadmissible que nous, plus de 10% de notre territoire est construit et formé par des mangroves. On sait que c'est dans le cadre des mangroves que les richesses halieutiques se produisent. Tout ce qui est poisson, tout ce qui est crevettes, tout ce qui est ça. Les camps où il fleurit le miel sont exactement ceux qui existent dans mon pays, à Guinée-Bissau. Mais jusqu'à maintenant, la Guinée-Bissau souffre de problèmes pour pouvoir exporter ces produits halieutiques en Europe. C'est inadmissible. En plus, les produits de la Guinée-Bissau quittent la Guinée-Bissau comme étant produits ailleurs, en Espagne, au Portugal, en Grèce, mais vraiment ce sont des produits de la Guinée-Bissau. C'est incompréhensible qu'au moment actuel, on produit 250 000 tonnes de cajou et que ces 200 000 tonnes de cajou quittent la Guinée-Bissau pour partir en Inde, en Singapour, etc., pour être transformées. Alors, toute la valeur ajoutée est acquis à l'extérieur du pays. Mais vraiment, ça c'est quoi? Il faut dire que il faut disons, réfléchir beaucoup pour savoir qu'on peut inverser ces mécanismes très rapidement si la volonté politique est là. Mais quand même, la volonté politique ne peut pas seulement être demandée aux pays moins développés, mais aussi aux pays développés. Parce qu'il faut vraiment qu'on puisse partager cette responsabilité. Alors voilà, pour moi, comment on doit dépasser les choses. Ce n'est pas seulement jeter la responsabilité au dos de quelqu'un, mais de partager cette responsabilité parmi nous tous. Savoir que si ça continue à arriver, c'est parce que nous ne sommes pas intéressés à régler ce problème.
Thank you very much. So I'm glad also
if you fail to do so, this would simply mean that we don't
you
want to
highlighted
these issues.
the importance of value addition. Cashewnut is very important for Guinea-Bissau. In fact, UN Technology Bank has a project trying to minimize the post-harvest waste. Perhaps Federica could refer to it. I will actually direct the same question to South Sudan, His Excellency Mr. James Morgan as well. And while I'm really terribly sorry, but time-wise, I'm very conscious. But I'll direct it to you the same question, specifically apart from the sanctions you mentioned, which has to be removed. What is it that one or two areas that Sudan needs from the development partners? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Moderator. I'm going to be very brief. First of all, let me start from our last speaker, who said about the low capacity of production in the least developed countries is the cause of the situation we are in. First of all, in economic, we say the factors of production are three: land, capital, and yes, land, capital, and manpower. Now, all this we have, only that we don't have is the capital, because the capital is being controlled by some powers that we cannot get closer to. And this capital is controlled by the IMF and the World Bank, and then the UN because of the sanctions. So this all combined, it becomes very difficult for the least developed countries to do anything. And the least developed countries mainly are in Africa, yes. We have also a responsibility in Africa. Our responsibility should be the security, which we are able to control. Each country can control and can provide security for the development partners. But when it comes to the factors of production, we may lack capital. We have land which can produce food, can feed the world. But we don't have those tools to use in agriculture, like the mechanism, the mechanized agriculture that we need. Like in case of my country, South Sudan, we have almost 9 months of the rainfall throughout the year. We even don't need agriculture. We don't even, we don't need even, we don't need irrigation. 9 months of rainfall throughout the year is enough, where we don't require irrigation at all. But we still have these tools. The sanctions prohibit anybody who wants to supply these tools to us. Because you as a manufacturer, if you produce, you have these tools available with you and you want to give to South Sudan, the UN and the other countries that are sanctioning us will say, if you continue to supply your tools to South Sudan, we are going to sanction your company. So you yourself will stop giving us those tools that we need. So these are the difficulties that we are facing as a country. Like what I said from the beginning, that our stories in Africa differ from country to country. And this is where we are. We have felt that the sanctions are the one making us very weak. Answering what our last speaker said, yes, we have low production because we are not given opportunity. And when you say here that no one should be left behind, we should not be left behind because of another reason, but because we are being given in the situation we are in, so things become very difficult. During the COVID-19, I think the whole world was given a lesson where the COVID did not care whether you are rich or you are poor, whether you are black or white, whether you are yellow or whatever color you have. COVID was the right lesson for all of us as mankind. We should have learned from the COVID. But still, after the COVID, even under the COVID, we were still under sanctions. Imagine this. Huh? We are suffering from COVID and we are suffering from sanctions. So that was a double punishment, whether from nature, and then there was also somebody behind torturing us. So this is what I want you to know, that there are countries in this world which are suffering for no reason. So, moderator, we thank this forum, because if you really want to know the situation of a prisoner, don't even ask the guard. Ask the prisoner himself. Is he okay? Is he happy in prison? No. This is where we are. So, for us to be equal, something called sanctions should be removed from any country, not only in Africa. In any country in the world, these things called sanctions in the UN or with the other countries that are exercising this sanction is as a tool to punish another mankind. This one is going back to slavery. It looks like slavery itself. Why do you punish another human being? Because you are powerful. The power you should use to help, not to punish. And that is what makes us not happy, that the United Nations should speak out on behalf of others, because the UN should be our forum for all of us all in the world, that this is our club. We are members of the United Nations. We contribute money to the United Nations. So United Nations also should speak equally to us to protect human being or to protect mankind. This way, we can say no man is left behind. But without this, okay. Moderator, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think the message is very clear. But I would like also to hear the perspective from Central African Republic. If there are many, many areas where development partners can be helpful, not only removing sanctions, but in many areas. But if you, since we don't have time, if you really have to identify two, what will be? What will they be?
Merci. Je vais essayer d'être très, très bref parce que tout a été dit. Je pense que dans le cadre du partenariat que nous avons avec les grandes organisations, notamment avec les Nations Unies, il faut que ces partenaires ne nous parlent pas de leurs priorités, ils parlent de nos priorités. S'ils viennent nous appuyer, c'est pour connaître nos difficultés, nos besoins, nos attentes, et pas venir avec des conditions pour dire voilà, le monde, la communauté internationale a décidé ça et vous devez, sous combien de temps vous allez atteindre ces objectifs. Je pense que, comme l'a dit mon frère, c'est... Nous ne nous mettons pas à l'écart, nous sommes mis à l'écart. La preuve, nos défis dans ces pays les moins avancés, surtout en Afrique, bon nombre ont des défis sécuritaires. Mais l'Afrique n'est pas représentée au niveau du Conseil de sécurité. Ceux qui décident de notre avenir, de notre sort, ou de nos solutions en termes de sécurisation, de stabilisation, c'est ceux qui sont à des milliers de kilomètres et qui pensent, parce qu'il y a beaucoup d'experts en Afrique du Nord, en Afrique du Sud, en Afrique subsaharienne et autres, mais qui sortent leur rapport sur la base d'expériences, soit parce qu'ils ont passé 2 jours sur le terrain, soit parce qu'ils ont lu un rapport de telle organisation. Non, nous vivons sur le territoire, nous vivons tous les jours les difficultés. Venez parler avec nos populations qui nous font part de leurs difficultés, de ce qu'ils attendent, de leurs priorités. Donc c'est ça qui est important. Dans le cadre du dialogue ou du partenariat, partenariat veut bien dire mais il faut s'écouter. Il ne faut pas que les choses soient mises dans des conditions. J'ai entendu ici oui, effectivement, il y a des besoins technologiques, il y a des besoins en éducation et autres. Mais encore une fois, parlant de mon pays, je dirais comment les dirigeants centrafricains peuvent arriver à former leurs élites dans des conditions qui sont des conditions de précarité. Manque d'infrastructures, manque de niveau d'éducation. Alors, les propositions qui sont faites ici pour former les ingénieurs et autres, oui, je demanderais aux partenaires de venir en République centrafricaine en particulier, de venir construire des écoles, construire des universités, pour que justement la plus grande masse de nos jeunes, parce qu'on a une population majoritairement jeune, puisse avoir accès à cette éducation. Parce qu'on reçoit souvent, oui, envoyer 5, 10 de vos jeunes pour être formés. Ils en participent à la fuite des cerveaux, parce que quand ils arrivent ailleurs, ils découvrent que la vie est meilleure et ils ne reviennent pas. Donc ça semble être une solution, mais au final, ça devient une complication pour nos pays. Il faut venir sur nos terres, voir nos besoins, discuter avec nous de nos priorités. Souvent, nos partenaires viennent discuter de leurs priorités. Alors que nos objectifs, nos défis sont tout autres. Donc, et puis il faut nous écouter, tout simplement. Je pense que c'est ça le mot d'ordre qu'il faudrait avoir. Il y a des besoins technologiques, j'ai entendu aussi ici. Nous avons des défis énergétiques. Il faut qu'on soit cohérent, il faut qu'il y ait une cohérence entre les solutions que l'on propose et la spécificité par pays. Effectivement, dans ces pays les moins avancés, nous sommes dans des situations un peu différentes, mais il faut venir s'adapter à la spécificité du pays, aux besoins, aux priorités du pays pour que la coopération soit efficace. Et il faut aussi laisser, dans les grandes représentations, nous laisser participer aussi, prendre notre place et nous laisser parler en notre propre nom. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. It's really clear. In fact, what I took from what you said, and maybe the UN should really listen to you, is you are saying it's not left behind, forced to remain behind. Maybe there is a clear message there. Actually, we were going to have, you may have seen in the program, another panelist, a very senior UN official, Under Secretary General Rabab Fatima. She is the High Representative for LDCs, landlocked countries, and small island development states. But unfortunately, due to some very urgent and conflicting commitment, she could not join us. Now, my last two questions, and again, I'm sorry, time is not just going to be short, is going to be to my UN colleagues, going back to Saba, to you. Very briefly, what are the values and benefits that the center can bring to the LDCs?
So we heard from Your Excellency about the need to listen. In the context of this frontier technology was both the Minister of Djibouti and the Minister of Bangladesh, who were very much driving. I think we heard here the interest around energy, around infrastructure and others. So absolutely, we do look forward to this sort of a demand driven. Secondly, we have most investment plans are driven by investors, and they say this is what we want to invest. But UNDP has a methodology we've done in many countries called Cartographie d'investissement, ODD, and it is driven by the governments itself. So that is a product we've done in a number of countries, Côte d'Ivoire, Djibouti, even Mali right now. So this is something we want to also offer. Two additional points about the flawed financial architecture. The head of UNDP was at the G20, and he said the purpose of the credibility of the G20 is how it affects the poorest of the world, not just trying to control inflation. In the context of high debt sustainability and all these things, the impact is incredible. I think the second one is the climate finance agenda and the damage and loss, and how, as you say, you're being listened to or not being listened to. This is going to be also very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me go to you, Federica. The same question again. What are the values and benefits that UN Technology Bank brings to the LDCs?
Thank you very much. I will just focus on one point. I think the conversation has been enriching enough. I think we've heard a lot on the importance of looking at the real needs from the reality of LDCs and not from abroad, let's say. So I wanted to highlight the fact that the Technology Bank has assumed as its key principle to work only on demand-driven initiatives. So the technology needs assessments that I was mentioning earlier are actually needs assessment. So they really aim to look upon request of the government of the LDC with which we develop needs assessment to look at really what are the technological needs of that specific countries, because also generalizing of, discussing the needs of 45 different least developed countries is also quite challenging. So clearly there are specificities. And all the work we do on technology transfer is a follow-up to the needs that emerged from the technology needs assessment, and again, very strongly rooted in the principle of being demand-driven. So this, for us, is well understood and a key principle of our work. And to complement this, the role I think the Technology Bank is really trying to play is that of being a facilitator between the demand and supply of technology, between the demand and supply of expertise, and so try to facilitate this conversation, build a partnership when these partnerships are not easily developed. So we do not really have all our answers, all the know-how, all the technologies ourselves. We do try to make sure these gaps are somehow narrowed, and therefore results can be accelerated based on the needs of the LDCs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Demand-driven, in other words, means His Excellency Mr. Morgan said, listen to the prisoners. I think there's similarity there. So demand-driven means do what the countries want and need. I think this has been, I don't know whether you agree, but it's been a very, very useful, fruitful discussion. We are a bit over time. We have taken a lot of time. Maybe there's another meeting, but I would hate to leave without at least one or two questions from audience. There are a lot of young people, and they've been listening. It would be good if you ask the Excellencies questions. One question? My friend there, yeah.
I want to ask about a question about post-colonialism to Mr. James. Mr. James, what do you think about the post-colonial situations? What do you think about post-colonialism? Because I'm studying post-colonialism in the university, so I want to know about your ideas about post-colonialism and language. Is it still continuing? Do you think the post-colonialism? And my second question is that what do you think about the language relationship between a language and African people in the Africa? Is that effective? Because as we know that maybe you heard about the Chiano Achebe, which is a very famous writer in the Nigerian. He's from Nigeria, and he said that we should use English. I want to express myself in my language, but I can't. So what do you think about that? What do you think about post-colonialism? Is it still continuing? Thank you very much.
With your permission, moderator, please let me answer. Thank you very much, young man, for that question. Colonialism is not a problem at the moment. And even the colonialists, I think they shared the knowledge with the African people. There's no problem about that. They were better than the present people we are talking about. If they were able to share what they had in education that they brought to Africa and the Africans got education through colonialism, there's no problem. But we are talking of the present, where some countries in Africa are suffering not because of their own making. They are suffering because of something called the UN being used as a tool to punish others. The UN is a tool of punishing people, not that it doesn't bring prosperity to the world. So colonialism now, we just forget about it. Because colonialism at least even was better than the UN now. Colonialism was able to share the knowledge and brought education to the countries that are suffering now. But we are talking about the UN, which is now being used to punish at the 21st century, something that would have not happened. Expressing yourself in your own language, when you are educated, it is okay. What is wrong with that? Now, in Sudan, we used to speak Arabic as well as English. Now Swahili has come in, and we are all able to speak these languages. There's no problem about that. So we are not concerned about colonialism anymore. Colonialism, I think, brought us together. That was also something during that time. We're talking of the present, 21st century, where we talk very nice. Nobody should be left behind. Nobody should be left behind. But on the other hand, the UN is a tool of punishing other people. This is where we are concerned. And this should be completely stopped so that we can always talk exactly like that. No one should be left behind. If we do this, if the UN is for all of us, as it was formed for all of us, and if you are all members of the UN must be put in a place where it treats people equally, like what my sister said, that the UN has got only 5 members in the Security Council. These 5 members, in fact, are the rulers of the world. Africa is not one of them. 5 members of the UN Security Council are the ones who can bring prosperity to some and they bring oppression to others. These are the situations that we are talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me ask the organizers, do we have time? Yeah, okay, good. Very interesting discussion. I'll come to you. The young man has really raised a very interesting point. Excellency, Mr. Morgan, you also bringing that the old colonialism has gone. There is a new form of colonialism in the guise of UN. That's very interesting. But in Africa, I was going to come to you. In Africa, we also talk about Francophone countries, Anglophone countries. These are remnants of the colonial. I think that's what he's referring to in my opinion. Excellency. Mr. Pereira, you have the floor.
Je voudrais juste revenir avec une autre question à un jeune qui a posé cette question. On vérifie aujourd'hui des tensions géopolitiques et je lui demanderai comment il voit ça par rapport à l'instabilité du système de gouvernance en Afrique. Est-ce qu'il y a un rapport? Est-ce que ça peut être lié au problème postcolonial et linguistique?
The instability of the governance systems in Africa, or does that have to do something with post-colonialism and the language? I would like to ask you.
Very good. That actually should be also directed to. We have someone actually Francophone and Southern African abroad. You are not only Minister for Foreign Affairs, but Francophone and Central Africans abroad. So, Excellency, go ahead. No, Madame Sylvie.
Merci. Pour répondre à cette question qui est très intéressante, dans ma première intervention, j'ai parlé de nouvelles formes de colonialisme. On fait face à un colonialisme moderne. Alors la problématique de la langue n'est pas forcément un sujet. Parce que effectivement, dans mon pays est dans une zone francophone, donc, où on parle le français, on étudie en français, mais nous avons aussi notre propre langue. Et effectivement, ça fait aussi partie, par contre, de la responsabilité du pays de faire en sorte de vulgariser et puis de promouvoir sa propre langue. Je pense que le monde est dans un monde de diversité, mais aussi parce qu'au plan international, si j'arrive ici et que je me mets à parler en sango, qui est ma langue nationale, il va falloir à ce que les membres de l'organisation du forum puissent aller trouver un centrafricain ou quelqu'un qui parle la langue centrafricaine pour faire la traduction. Donc il y a des langues qui ont été érigées comme étant des langues internationales. Alors si la diversité culturelle de l'Afrique est une richesse. Et nous avons énormément de langues. Donc si chaque pays vient parler sa langue, je pense qu'il y aura beaucoup plus d'interprètes que de participants à ce panel. Mais il faut, je suis d'accord qu'il faut que chaque pays puisse faire la promotion, surtout au niveau national. Il ne faut pas qu'on laisse à l'arrière. La République centrafricaine a cette chance d'avoir une langue nationale parlée par tous sur tout le territoire. Nous avons le patois, effectivement, dans chaque zone. Nous avons une langue nationale qui est parlée et comprise par toute la population. Par rapport à d'autres pays ou dans certaines régions, les langues, même au niveau national, sont différentes. Nous avons cette particularité, donc du coup, c'est quelque chose qui doit davantage nous fédérer. Mais par rapport à votre zone d'analyse, de réflexion, le post-colonialisme, oui, pour moi, il existe, en tout cas sur la zone francophone, elle existe toujours. Pour simple exemple, on a parlé des conflits, en tout cas de positionnement à aujourd'hui. Nous, les pays africains, en tout cas je parle de la partie francophone, même dans la diversification de nos partenaires, c'est compliqué. Vous savez que le partage de l'Afrique a été fait lors du traité de Berlin et les murs de Berlin sont tombés, un certain nombre de choses sont tombées, mais ça n'est pas encore officiellement tombé, même si ce n'est pas affiché de manière très claire. Mais dans les actions, on sent qu'il y a toujours une volonté de mainmise, de positionnement. L'Afrique appartient, la partie francophone appartient plutôt à l'aspect francophone. Donc on voulait faire la diversification automatiquement. Ça froisse. Et si vous connaissez l'histoire de la République centrafricaine, nous avons cette volonté de diversifier. Et certains de nos partenaires ne plaisent pas à d'autres, mais nous sommes souverains. D'où le point de tout à l'heure, c'est que nos défis sont plutôt d'asseoir notre souveraineté pour justement sortir du post-colonialisme. Et il y a une citation, si je terminerai par là, qui est très importante, qui est une citation de l'ancien président américain John Fitzgerald Kennedy, qui dit « À force de vouloir taire les révolutions pacifiques, nous allons arriver à des révolutions violentes. » Et je pense qu'on a entamé cela et que nos anciennes colonies devraient plutôt écouter, encore une fois, plus. Les sanctions ne servent à rien. Elles ne font que renforcer et radicaliser davantage parce qu'en fait, des sanctions sont mises en réponse à juste une volonté personnelle de s'épanouir aussi, de s'épanouir autrement et tout simplement sur notre propre terre. Ailleurs, nous nous intégrons, mais sur notre propre terre, nous avons ce droit à l'épanouissement. Pourquoi il nous est refusé? Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I hope these reflections will help you with your research. My sister here would like to ask a question, and I'm not going to pose this question to my friends the other end, representatives of modern colonialism, but so I'll ask you.
My question is very short. In our country, I'm from Turkey, our president, Mr. Erdogan, is always emphasized that the world is bigger than 5 in United Nations Security Council. You said that there's a problem in United Nations and something is wrong and we need to talk and we need to do something about it. What steps should we take? What we can do about this? I'm asking to you, the United Nations representative, is there something wrong going in the United Nations system or not? Thank you.
So I work on the development agency side, not on the other side. I think definitely the book that His Excellency President Erdogan wrote on the world is bigger than 5 is a point for debate, but this is actually a question for, you have here ministers from countries. How do they envision this change can happen in terms of representation? I think I would pose the question to them.
Well, I think this is an important question because sometimes, in my view, I'm not in the UN anymore, so...
He can speak.
A disclaimer, so I can say this. These guys are. No, but honestly, the UN is as good as the member states make it to be. Sometimes we think the UN is sort of an independent body by its own. The member states make up the UN. So whatever UN does is very much what the member states decide. The fact that there are 5 countries that are not willing to share the Security Council with anybody else is really, only these countries are answerable, not the UN. Please.
De notre part, ce n'est pas d'aujourd'hui qu'on réclame cette restructuration du système, soit au niveau politique, pour ce qui concerne précisément le Conseil de sécurité et l'absence des pays africains dans le Conseil de sécurité, ce qui est très grave. Et c'est pour ça qu'on réclame un autre multilatéralisme que ce n'est pas celui d'aujourd'hui. Soit au niveau financier, c'est la même chose. Ça fait des années qu'on réclame une restructuration de ce système. Ça tarde, mais ça va arriver, c'est sûr. Mais quand même, jusqu'à là, les Nations Unies sont mieux qu'on peut avoir.
Oui, merci. Je vais faire le lien avec la question précédente. Le Conseil de sécurité, la représentation, c'est l'exemple même du post-colonialisme. Parce que vous avez justement à l'intérieur de ces pays, les pays qui ont été colonisateurs. Et en plus, les 2 grandes puissances qui sont arrivées, donc la Chine et la Russie en plus, pour faire l'équilibre. Mais vous avez le Royaume-Uni, le Sud-Soudan a parlé de sa colonisation par le Royaume-Uni, vous avez la République française. Mon pays est une colonie de la République française. Voilà, c'est l'exemple même du fait que ce post-colonialisme continue. La demande de la réforme du Conseil de sécurité date de plus de 20 ans, où nous réclamons. Ce que nous avons eu droit, c'est d'avoir 3 membres non permanents, donc qui ne sont pas dans les 5 décisionnaires du Conseil, et que nous devons choisir dans le cadre de des pays qui sont membres de l'Union africaine, donc avec la diversité qui représente l'Union africaine. Nous nous battons pour cela, mais justement, le monde n'est pas équitable parce que c'est encore ce partage. L'Afrique, en tout cas la partie francophone, le porte-plume au Conseil de sécurité, c'est la République française. Le porte-plume, dans le cas, et d'ailleurs le Sud-Soudan et la République africaine ont des dossiers au Conseil de sécurité. Nous sommes sous sanction tous les 2, et je peux en parler parce que régulièrement, je vais au Conseil de sécurité pour défendre la cause de mon pays, mais je viens après que le rapport soit fait, et des fois des choses qui ne sont pas forcément justes, et ça crée des tensions. Mais c'est l'exemple même du fait qu'aujourd'hui, et je l'ai dit aussi, l'ONU a été mise en place après la défaite de la Société des Nations suite à la Première Guerre mondiale, qui a montré qu'effectivement la Société des Nations ne répondait pas à la volonté de la stabilité, en tout cas de la paix au niveau international, parce que nous avons eu une Seconde Guerre mondiale. L'ONU a été mise en place justement après cette Seconde Guerre mondiale pour stabiliser, apporter la paix, et avec justement l'organe garant de la paix au niveau international qui est le Conseil de sécurité. Mais aujourd'hui, quand on fait l'état du monde, il y a encore plus de guerres qu'il y avait avant. Donc l'ONU a atteint ses limites. Pourquoi? Parce qu'au sein de cette représentativité, ceux qui décident pour les autres, ils ne sont pas, ils sont, je dirais peut-être dépassés, ou qu'à l'intérieur, il n'y a pas la représentation de ceux qui peuvent parler et apporter des solutions beaucoup plus viables et plus efficaces. Et je m'inquiète davantage parce qu'aujourd'hui, même au sein de ces 5, ils se battent aussi entre eux. Donc du coup, nous qui ne sommes pas là, nous sommes encore plus en risque par rapport aux grandes décisions de notre monde. Donc vraiment, je soutiens les propos du président Erdogan, et je l'invite à plaider davantage notre cause, parce que nous, comme je l'ai dit, ça fait plus de 20 ans que nous réclamons cela. Mais ce n'est pas un combat pour aller au sein du Conseil de sécurité, c'est un combat pour nous faire entendre. Et du coup, la position des grandes puissances à l'intérieur, ils le sentent bien, c'est pour ça qu'ils résistent. Donc nous sommes encore dans une situation post-coloniale. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your question as well. Oh, since you provoked this discussion, I will give you the floor.
Thank you very much. The question you ask is very important. In the first place, the Security Council itself, the members, the 5, two members of the Security Council, China and Russia, have always stood with the suffering people. You have seen either if there's anything against a country, either China and Russia will abstain. If they don't like to use their powers of veto, they will abstain. But the three members, which my colleague from Central Africa said, these other three members always work together. To go against the poor, still to punish the poor people. Because, as he said exactly, they themselves came from the background of either slave masters and colonialists at the same time. So you cannot put your chicken to be taken care of by a fox. Okay? That's the meaning of it. Thank you.
I think the message is clear. No, but seriously, I'm really glad, Excellencies, Excellency Mr. Morgan, I'm glad you raised this issue and it provoked a discussion, because I think the Antalya Diplomacy Forum is the right place to discuss this kind of issues. And I hope in the future these are the topics that will attract people who have something to say, but elsewhere is the wrong place, but this is the right place. So I hope in the future more and more discussion like this. I can afford to say that now. I'm not in the UN anymore. So, but anyway, thank you very much, Excellencies. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm sorry it took longer. Bye-bye. Merci beaucoup.